You made it! Yes, this is Bills by the Numbers, presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up, a last look back at how Buffalo's 2021 season could have been different had they come out on the right end of their coin flip games. And we're not even talking about the divisional playoff in Kansas City. Ty Schalter, the football analyst who put together the opportunities lost, explains why the Bills were at the top of that list. And we've got our one burning question. Hey, Steve, heads I win, tails you lose. Glad to have you join us here on Bills by the Numbers, presented by FanDuel. And we're out of the blocks with a very interesting look back at the 2021 season. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker there, Chris Brown, Bills Insider here. Ty Schalter from the FiveThirtyEight.com put together a very interesting chart on coin flip games, which we'll explain more in a second. But, Steve, we know the games that stood out the most last season for the Bills. Tennessee, Jacksonville, the first New England game, and the Tampa overtime game. Those were their coin flip games last year. They came out on the wrong end of every single one of them.
Yeah, and I think perhaps even the Pittsburgh game on opening day kind of might have qualified for a minute. They got to do better. Now, it did look good for them because they won all their games by double digits, lost all but one of their games by single digits. They were within a score of all of those games at the end, except for the Indianapolis game, which is the one game last year where they had no shot.
Wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and so all those things point to you being a really solid team, no question about it, and of course the Bills were. But you start to look at those results, and you search for reasons why they're not winning close games. Is it an attitude? Is it decisions? Is it different reasons every week, in which, every game is different, and certainly every game is unique. But what can they do to give themselves a better chance in one-score games? Certainly look at the Tennessee game. Josh slips on a quarterback sneak. Otherwise, they get the yardage needed, and they have a chance to win the game.
They're in the end zone, and they win.
The Tampa Bay game, Steph Diggs getting down the sidelines, gets pulled and grabbed, and there's like 19,000 photos on YouTube.
That happened twice
that
in that game.
That's right. That he got pulled on. There was no call, which would have set up the Bills for the game-winning score. The
New
England game, of course, 40-mile-an-hour winds dooms them. So every game like that, in those close games, all the ones we've mentioned, seem very different in their outcome and the reasons for the outcome. But you start to look at it, and there's a trend there. There's no question about it.
Yeah. We know that those 4 losses were instrumental in forcing the Bills to go on the road after the wild card round to the playoffs. They had to go to Kansas City, where the Chiefs have not lost in the playoffs since 2018, when an offsides penalty negated a Chiefs interception against Tom Brady and the Patriots, who went on to win in overtime and advance to the Super Bowl. Talk about a coin flip game. But it kept the Bills from hosting playoff games throughout the postseason, and I think we know unequivocally it made a difference. And it was a theme in the aftermath comments from Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, and Josh Allen. The goal now is home field advantage throughout the playoffs. ESPN Stats and Information put together the criteria for what's described as a coin flip game. It is a game in which the favorite in the matchup had a 60% win probability or less, with 5 minutes or less left in regulation. The Bills and the Colts had the most such games that went the wrong way for them last season. Both Buffalo and Indy had 4 such games last year, meaning the Colts would have made the playoffs if just one of those games had gone their way, and the Bills could have had home field advantage throughout the playoffs had just the Titans game gone their way and Josh Allen not slipped at the goal line, because that would have made the Bills 12-5 on the season, Tennessee 11-6, and then the Bills had the head-to-head in the regular season against Kansas City, and the Bills would have been the top seed in the AFC. Steve, I know you're not a fan of woulda, coulda, shoulda, but we're not talking about all 4 of those coin flip games going Buffalo's way. We're talking about just one.
Yeah, and that's a pretty frustrating position to be in. That's how good the Bills have been over the last 2 years. I'm one of the few people who you hear about saying, listen, in 2020 when they got beat by 2 touchdowns in Kansas City, they were good enough to go to and win the Super Bowl that year. They certainly were good enough last year at the end of the year offensively when they had a number 1 defense and their offense was humming on all cylinders and played an absolutely perfect game against the New England Patriots in the wild card round.
Right.
That's how good they are. The question, but the problem is there's so many moving parts, and you don't get to, when you're that good and you get to that level of play in the postseason, you're not playing in a vacuum. The Chiefs are a very good football team. The Patriots were a very good playoff football team. The year before, the Chiefs were very good. The Baltimore Ravens were a very good team the year before that, and so were the Indianapolis Colts. They have won a lot of playoff games against good teams, but you've got to keep winning. And I've said it's my mantra. You got to play well on that day. You have to play well on that day. Take it from an old guy who got his head caved in 4 straight Super Bowls. That day is the one that matters. And every break and every bad bounce and every bad call or non-call and every mistake mentally is magnified. And the Bills have fallen victim to that over the last 3 years. Even in Houston, they come out with a 16-0 lead in 2018 or 19. And can't finish the deal. So you've got to play well on that day, no matter how good you are. Great teams know that, and the Bills, have yet to get to the ultimate game. But they have, when you get to those playoff games, every single play matters. I told you they made a couple of mistakes in that 13 seconds. They made a couple of consecutive mistakes on consecutive plays. That's the game. Yeah. Period. If the Chiefs would have made a couple of extra mistakes, the Bills would have won that game.
Yeah, I think the only thing that gives me solace in seeing these numbers with the Bills and the Colts at the top of the chart with 4 such coin flip games that went the wrong way, realizing that if everything bounced right, the Bills could have been 15-2, and heck, the Colts could have been 13-4. But to me, that's unrealistic because you're not going to get all the bounces. As we've talked about a lot, the margins from one team to the next are so narrow that very often it's just, as you often say, 2 or 3 plays in a game can flip a game. And so what I take solace in, Steve, is the Bills are such a good team. They didn't need all 4 of those games to go their way, but if just one did, they could have been hosting the AFC playoffs. The AFC playoffs would have gone through Buffalo with just that Titans game and a slip on the turf. And granted, a good play by Tennessee's defensive line. I mean, they owned the line of scrimmage on that last play from scrimmage, too. Even if Josh did have good footing, I still don't know if he gets in because Jeffrey Simmons blew that play up from the jump. But I guess I take solace in that because when you look at this coming season, you say, oh, damn, that means we got to win every coin flip game. I don't think they do. They have to win a couple of them. They have to win a couple of the tight ones going forward. But looking back on those 4 games, do we consider any of those losses just a product of bad luck or just a bad day? I know you kind of touched on them a little bit, but would you call some of them bad luck or just a bad day? How would you categorize them?
And we call them coin flip. If it was truly a coin flip, you'd expect to win half of them.
Yeah.
Not just 1 out of 4, but 2 out of 4.
Or 0 out of 4.
Right, or 0 out of 4. If it was truly a coin flip, which is not what we're talking about, but you can make a case for the Kansas City game last year came down to the coin flip at the end when Josh called,
and that one's not even in this equation.
I think he called tails and it came up heads, right? Yeah. So, it's some of them were bad luck. Some were non-calls.
I would call the Titans game bad luck. The Titans game bad luck. Your quarterback slips on the turf. I mean,
the Tampa Bay game was the officials' call.
Tampa is bad luck because there was pass interference calls on 2 pretty important plays that were not called that likely would have changed the course of that game. It's a fresh set of downs on the 1-yard line for the Bills on that one where Diggs almost gets his pads ripped off through his jersey.
Right. So, some of it's bad luck. Some of it's
Jaguars
just
a bad
mistake.
Day. Wouldn't you say Jaguars game, that's a bad day.
And I'll say this, too.
The
AFC Championship game 2 years ago was a bad day for the Bills, great day for the Chiefs. They played their best game in 3 months in that game. The Bills played their worst game in 2 months in that game, the last 10 weeks. So, a lot of it's sprinkled in there. There's every reason why you lose games. None of them are exactly the same. The Bills are too good to get beat the same way week after week.
Okay.
So every game is going to take a different scenario for you to get the best of this team because they're that good.
All right, so let's explore that. Knowing the Bills only had one loss last year that was by more than one score, what has to be different in the handful, and you may have answered this already, what has to be different in the handful of close ones that Buffalo might have to make sure they finish them off with W's? Because you know how stacked the AFC is this year.
You know, I think you play within yourself, no question. You got a quarterback like Josh, and when the chips are down, and he's being credited with 8 come from behind or game-winning drives in his career, and you think about it, he could have 11. 11.
Yeah.
The first in 2018, the Charles Clay drop. That would have been the game winner in that game. It was on the last play of the game. The Kyler Murray, Hail Murray. A Hail Mary beats him after he had driven down and hit Diggs in the corner of the end zone with 32 seconds left. The 13-second game in Kansas City. There's 3 where he did everything he could.
Throw the Houston playoff game.
The guy is clutch.
Throw the Houston playoff game in. Drives him down to give Stephen Hauschka a chance to kick a field goal to force overtime after the collapse happened.
Right.
So,
he's clutch. So, yes, I don't know what to say. I don't think anything has to change. I think certainly their defense needs to play better in crucial moments where you can't let those guys off the hook. You know, a lucky catch. You have your 3 best defensive backs defending the guy, and he makes the catch.
Right.
Those kind of things. And you know, and it's a little bit on the coaches too, where they're playing too soft in Kansas City, and they got 3 timeouts, so they don't need, they don't need to stop the clock's no problem. So it's something different every game, and so I don't think there's a generality that something has to change. You just got to do better at everything you do in those crunch moments.
I kind of look at some of those games last year, and I say to myself, okay, what has to change is the Bills have to have more of those grinded-out wins when they're in a tight game and may not have their best that day. Pittsburgh's an example of that, and you look at the big banner hanging out on the practice field. Find a way to win the game. Jacksonville is a perfect example from last year. They played down to their level of competition. They were not playing their best. It's a field goal game. You have to find a way to win that game anyway, even when you don't have your best. And that doesn't just mean Josh. You got to have other guys coming up with a play somewhere that shifts the course of the game so you can pull it out in the end, even if you do not play your best. That's the way they get over this hump that has seemingly stood in their way in the playoffs or in the regular season that hasn't gotten them the seed they wanted in the playoffs. To me, that's what has to change first and foremost. All right, good discussion there. We'll dive into the coin flip games on a league-wide basis a bit more with the 538's Ty Schalter shortly. But right now, it's time for the numbers game. This week, Steve will have to come up with 7 of the top 10 teams in point differential. Points are what wins games, as we know. So, Steve, can you name 7 teams in the top 10 for point differential in 2021?
All right. I will start with the Buffalo Bills.
Led the league, plus 194. That was your gimme.
Right. I will go to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Chiefs were 5th, plus 116 on the year last year.
The Los Angeles Rams.
Rams were 6th, plus 88. You are 3 for 3.
Tampa Bay.
Tampa number 4 on the list, plus 158. Did you cheat?
No.
Are you looking up the list as we
No,
speak?
I've got a list of the teams here, so I don't forget anybody that I need to do.
Okay.
You know. I know who. Tennessee.
Tennessee is incorrect.
Really?
They were not.
They're the 1 seed.
They won a lot of close games.
Wow. Okay.
A lot of close games.
All
As a
right.
matter of fact, I want to see where they are on these coin flip games.
All right, wait a minute. All right, Green Bay.
Green Bay is on the list, just squeaked in at number 10, plus 79.
Where am I at?
So far you have Buffalo, Tampa, Kansas City, the Rams, and Green Bay. You need 2 more to satisfy 7 of the top 10
That's
needed.
6 you just mentioned.
Buffalo, Tampa, Kansas City, Rams, Green Bay. You have 5. You need 2 more to satisfy the quota. Cincinnati, number 8, plus 84. You need 1 more, my friend.
Oh, baby. Here it is. Dallas.
Dallas plus 172. Steve, second in the league in point differential,
Really?
and they did not make the playoffs. Do you know what that
They
says
didn't
to
make
me?
the playoffs last year?
Oh, wait. Dallas.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
They were-
got
they
in
were
and
the
then-
3 seed.
And then they blew it.
Then they blew it. Yeah,
They blew
were
the
like one
playoff
and
game.
done.
That's what it
they were
was.
12-5. The Dallas Cowboys were.
Yes. Plus
Yeah.
170. Maybe it's just in my head. I never want to see them in the postseason. That must be what it is. But to me, when you're plus
What space you think
172,
they occupy in my head?
you're plus 172.
Yeah, you got to win.
And you don't
Well,
even-
that's 12-5. That's a pretty good season.
Yeah, it is a
you
good
know?
season, but you got to do better than getting in. You
Yeah.
got to win a game. Indianapolis, 7th in point differential, Steve, plus 86, did not make the postseason. So that's a rough one.
Yeah.
Every other team in the top 10 in point differential qualified for the playoffs. Indianapolis, the only team that did not. I should also mention the
Indianapolis
Bills.
didn't make the playoffs, though. Who was it? Pittsburgh that didn't make the top 10?
Pittsburgh did not make the
Yeah,
top
okay,
10.
They
got
were
in.
They got in, yeah. So New England,
There's
Vegas,
one or two other
Cincinnati,
teams.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
The teams you did not get on this list: New England, 3rd in point differential, plus 159. I am not expecting that this year from them. And the other team you did not get, Arizona, plus 83. They were 9th in point differential. Bills also 3rd in first half point differential and 1st in second half point differential last year.
Yeah.
Heck of a point producing season for the Bills. All right. Right now, new customers can get their first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Just sign up today by going to sportsbook.fanduel.com or by downloading the FanDuel Sportsbook app. FanDuel Sportsbook, an official partner of the Buffalo Bills. Time for us now to catch up with the 538 NFL contributor, Ty Schalter, who wrote the NFL teams that made their own luck and misfortune in 2021. Here's Ty. All right, Ty, so let's start here. The thing that I took from the write-up is you can choose, if you're an NFL fan, to call your team lucky or unlucky, or you can choose to call your team clutch or not clutch. Based on the data, what do you think is a more apt description here? What is the fairer description? Lucky or unlucky, or clutch or not clutch?
Great question. You got right to the end first. We know statistically, NFL results are consistent with about 3/4 of it being either the better team wins or luck goes the better team's way, right? So about a quarter, maybe even a little more of all NFL results come down to pure luck. And that's just, just the way the ball bounces, funny shaped ball and all that. And what I tried to look at is, every year people go, oh, well, look at how our team did in 1-score games, especially, if your team does not have talent like the Bills, did not make the playoffs. You're sitting there going, yeah, well, if we just, won all those games that were so close, then it would be, we can do it. We're not that far away. But as we know, all games that finish within 1 score weren't actually winnable. So what I try to do is go back and look at what games are actually winnable, what games are actually close at the end. How did your team do in those games? And like you said, some of it is luck, and some of it comes down to clutch. And I think, in some circumstances, the Colts lost all 4 close games they played. And, you might look at that and say, well, maybe the quarterback wasn't so clutch, but then we also see that the Bills did the same. And we know that Josh Allen comes up big in big moments.
What do you think is the – I mean, that's what you're trying to do with these analytics. You kind of dive deep and try and be predictive, or try and get to where what is the trait or thing that you can fix to give you a better chance in these 1-score games. And we kind of dashed down over just off the top of our heads about the close games the Bills lost, and it seems to be a completely different reason in each one of them. The quarterback slips on a quarterback sneak, or – a missed call on an official, a dropped pass in this spot.
Ridiculous wind against New England.
40-mile-per-hour winds, that kind of thing. What is the generalization that you can draw from these 1-score games? Because you're right, it comes down to a myriad of unforeseeable circumstances.
Yeah, and that's where we go to other metrics like, scoring margin. The Bills outscored their opponents by a lot, right? We expect them to win even more games than they won. There's a thing called Pythagorean Wins, which kind of looks at that and goes, okay, you outscored your opponents by this many points per game on average. You should have won this many games, and the Bills underperformed in terms of wins and losses. So that's exactly where you look at. This is more of a luck thing than a skill thing. And certainly you look at, Colts and some of the other teams that may have been unlucky, and you start to look at, well, okay, was this a talent thing? How close were they playing teams? You look at somebody like the Ravens, and I know we talk about this as like analytics, like what is this all, voodoo or whatever, but the Ravens, the numbers that we saw in the coin flip games, they were right up there at the top with the most games won late, and right there at the top of the most games lost late, because that's how their team played. They played conservative on offense early. Their defense could not keep pace, and they got aggressive on offense late to make up for it. And Lamar Jackson got him within striking distance time after time after time. And sometimes they won and sometimes they lost. And I think, well, what do you need to fix? You need to fix that defense, first of all. And then you need to make sure you have the weapons to get aggressive on offense early and be protecting a lead instead of always chasing one.
Which seems like an awfully dangerous tightrope to walk as an approach to football games.
Yeah.
And as we know, the Ravens ended up on the wrong end of that and didn't qualify for the playoffs. What I found interesting, though, was where you were writing about randomness in football games and how it doesn't just exist in the last 5 minutes, which is kind of what you look to determine coin flip games, but that it's a down-to-down constant. Can you just define what randomness is in this whole examination?
Yeah, sure. Well, and it's like the stuff that you said. Okay, there's not a talent or scheme thing you can do to fix 40-mile-an-hour wind. There's not a talent or scheme thing you can do to miss a blown call, right? To fix that. What you can control, but even then stuff happens. Everything goes right. Quarterback puts the ball in the right spot, bounces off the receiver's hands, the guy who normally catches it, right? There's all sorts of things that happen every single play that influence the result. And one of the things we talk about, like high leverage situations at the end of both halves, in the last 5 minutes of the second half is important. At the last 5 minutes of the first half is important too. Maybe it's that third down that you didn't convert on the second series that would have been the one that got you within scoring distance, that got you 3 points, and then you lost by 2 at the end, right? So that happens throughout the game. And part of this is trying to figure out where are you failing to optimize, where are you failing to make the right decisions, where you can do better. And obviously, the Bills, talent-laden team, made a lot of right decisions, lost some very close games by some very weird circumstances, and they've certainly continued to grow stronger throughout the offseason. And you look at that and you go, this is a team that looks set to do better this year than they did last year, just in terms of wins and losses.
Yeah.
Right. Does a team that's talented, and there's good teams, bad teams, or whatever, maybe teams that are horse race, 2 bad teams look like 2 good teams, right? I mean, and 2 great teams look the same. Is there something about good teams or bad teams that helps them to overcome the bad things that happen outside of this coin flip time? The last 5 minutes of a game where it's close and each team has a chance to win. Do good teams overcome the stuff that happened before that to get them into this spot, or do bad teams find a way to blow it early on, and the good team doesn't run out and leave them? There's all kinds of scenarios you can conjure up for this, but what separates good teams and bad teams, and how many coin flip games they get into, I guess?
Yeah, well, I guess it's really situational football, right? And understanding the talent that you have and asking them to do what they do well, right? We talk about this, and again with the Ravens, John Harbaugh took a lot of heat for his late game decision making, where he went for it over and over again, going for the win instead of the tie. And people are like, "What are you thinking?" He's like, "I'm thinking I've got Lamar Jackson, maybe the most dangerous short yardage threat in the game, and I've got like 2 healthy cornerbacks on the roster that have played every snap this game. If this goes to overtime, this is not going to go my way," right? Yeah. So understanding, okay, I'm looking at all these numbers based on averages. Where is my team different than the average? Where are my strengths? What are the other team's weaknesses? And kind of applying that, again, down to down throughout the game, and understanding, okay, well, if I punt in opponent territory in the second quarter, okay, I'm kicking the can down the road. I'm making a safe play. And in years past, you'd never get fired for that. But then at the end of the game, you're sitting there pulling out all the stops and throwing every down. and you're desperate to catch up, well, you've missed opportunities earlier. And I think, good coaches come in with prepared game plans and understand that you can't just go out and quote unquote play your game every single game. You've got to understand what you can do well and when you can do it well.
Yeah, you jarred my memory with the Ravens last year. I was agreeing with Harbaugh. You don't want to lengthen the game when you got nobody to put out there on defense. You want to shorten it and end it right now. So I was firmly in John Harbaugh's boat, 100%. All right, last one for you, Ty. You wrote that the average team's record last season could have changed by plus or minus 2.1 wins, and you said 8 teams, based on this data that we saw in your charts, had a swing of plus or minus 4 wins. Are we anticipating those numbers to hold true year over year? So, is that something we can anticipate again here in 2022?
Yeah, and I looked at this a couple of years ago, and I kind of looked over the last 6 years, which was about as far back as I had good data, and I didn't see any significant trend or change. I think this is about right. The Ravens were certainly as wild a team with as many games in swing as possible,
Right.
But really more than 3-4 games, you're not going to see much more than that. But I think across the board, most teams are going to play at least 2 or 3 where it's 50-50. Like I said, I defined it as 60-40 win probability late, or narrower between the two teams. So most teams are going to have 2 or 3 of these that could go their way or against them.
Yeah.
Ty, thanks so much.
Yeah. While I think the league loves having a lot of these coin flip games, I got to believe that a lot of fans have a lot shorter fingernails because of it. Thanks again, Ty. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you down the line.
Absolutely. Anytime, guys.
We move on now to our one burning question, and it deals with these coin flip games a bit, Steve. Coin flip games can flip in your favor if you can deliver a splash play. So with that in mind, do you believe the splash play potential for the Bills has gone up more on offense or defense? Looking at what they've added in the offseason.
I think it's absolutely defense. I think the pressure they're able to bring to bear on the passer, their elevated run defense up front is just going to have ripple effects. I think this defense will make way more splash plays than it did a year ago. They played extremely solidly up front and all over the field last year. Their secondary has a chance to be better than it was a year ago. Their front seven, I think there's no question they're going to play better than they did a year ago. And for that reason, I think they're going to see more desperate teams. And the only thing that may be different that may keep them static and maybe not have as many splash plays is the offense. Ken Dorsey and this offense, we don't know what it's going to look like. So unless they drop off significantly and don't score points like they did at the same pace last year, their opponents won't be in pressure situations to keep up. Like the Patriots were in the playoffs or in Week 16 matchup, and other teams down the line too. So, yeah, I think it's all on defense this year for their ability to make splash plays. It's going to be better.
It wasn't a knee-jerk answer for me. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to think about it first because I thought to myself, okay, Gabe Davis is going to have a bigger role. Looked pretty good in that Kansas City playoff game in terms of delivering splash plays. Isaiah McKenzie can be an electric performer out of the slot. Maybe not splash plays per se, but consistency. And then I was trying to think, okay, what does James Cook deliver? But it's a little bit more of an unknown. We don't really know, to your point, because Dorsey's the offensive coordinator. It might look a little bit different this year. So, yeah, for those reasons, I'm with you. I am on the defensive side of the ball as the side that delivers more splash plays this season. Von Miller alone is a big play multiplier. He's a force multiplier as a pass rusher just from what he can do himself on the field. Then the trickle-down effect from him in terms of the opportunity that could create for Greg Rousseau or Boogie Basham or A.J. Epinesa or Ed Oliver inside. Then you add the big uglies in the middle who are athletic in their own right, Tim Settle, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, helping Ed on the inside. I think this defensive front is going to be an absolute terror. And I think because of their pass rushing talents that have been added to the front, you're going to be able to drop 7 into coverage more often, which to me means you got more hands in the passing lanes To me, that means more interceptions as far
Right.
as I'm concerned. And so I think the splash play potential of the defense will go up precipitously this year. And I think there will be some games, knowing how stacked the AFC is, where we're going to be doing post-game analysis here on a Monday on our daily show, One Bills Live, and saying the defense won that game. And we didn't.
It could
We haven't
very well
said
happen.
that a whole
It's been
heck of a
while,
lot the
yeah.
last couple of
Yeah,
years.
It's been a while, but I think, you may be right. And it's going to be interesting to see that take place because the conference is loaded.
We leave you with our closing figure. While we know the Bills led the league in point differential, did you know they did it despite the lack of a consistent pass rush last season? The Bills were tied for 5th in the league in sack differential with a figure of plus 15, which tied them with San Francisco, who we know have proven pass rushers, Nick Bosa among others. So a pretty impressive showing for Buffalo's pass rush last year, despite not having a marquee pass rusher per se. Now with Von Miller and some athletic interior defenders, as we've mentioned, what does that differential look like this season? That's fun to think about.
Well, it was one of the reasons the sack differential is your sacks for and a sacks against. Josh didn't get sacked much.
That's right. Running around.
He's hard to catch. The fact that they're 5th means, the offensive line of the Bills did a nice job, and so did Josh, staying away from it.
Right.
So everything they got was plus almost. So
think about it now and what it could look like.
Because I'll say this, the Bills' offensive line is bigger and more athletic down inside, and that's pretty fun to think about.
Defensive line.
Defensive and offensive line, I think. I think Saffold and Bates are going to help. Not only in the pass protection, but also in the run game. If their run game is more effective, you don't have to throw as much, or the throws come out quicker because it's shorter yardage. If they're not top 5 this year,
in sack differential.
in sack differential, something's gone terribly wrong.
That'll put a wrap on this edition of Bills by the Numbers. Be sure to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use or watch us on the Bills YouTube channel. And remember, when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you next week, everybody.